lost $100 million? Hey guys, welcome back to the Bald Shredder channel. So, yeah, you guys remember during the lockdown and the pandemic and all that sales of guitars, electric guitars, kind of like went through the roof. They really took off. People that had never bought guitars before suddenly were buying guitars because they had, I guess, so much time on their hands and everybody was stuck at home and they were like, hey, you know what sounds cool? Learning to play the guitar. So a lot of companies, Fender included, really benefited from these increased sales and people buying all these guitars and musical equipment. Well, of course, we know that was never gonna last forever. And that definitely seems to be the case here. That whole guitar boom that was happening a year ago or a couple of years ago, it is definitely over. So there was an article today on guitarworld.com that really caught my eye, and some of the things in there I thought were pretty interesting and made me think a little bit. So I'm gonna read to you guys from this article. I'm gonna read to you some of it, maybe not the whole thing. I will definitely have a link for it in the description so you can go and read the whole thing if you want to. Gotta put on the old glasses cause the eyes are getting old just like the rest of me. Fender CFO Matt Janopal, I'm not sure how to say his name, has revealed that in 2022, the electric guitar giant had to deal with almost $100 million worth of canceled orders. Most players know by now that one of the few upsides of the pandemic was a boom in guitar sales. Indeed, after some years on the wane, guitar sales returned to their highest figures since the 60s Beatlemania boom. Of course, what goes up must come down, and a decline has subsequently followed. Now we have some concrete figures from the world's biggest guitar brand, Fender. We had 16 million people pick up a guitar during the pandemic. 30 million worldwide. Then of course we get to 2022 and people decide to start taking vacations or doing other things with their disposable income. Guitars were no longer the priority, and the tough call I had to make was dealing with retail partner cancellations of orders in the magnitude approaching $100 million. Okay, let me just talk about the $100 million here for a second. So depending on how you look at it, you could say Fender lost $100 million, or you could kind of say, well, they didn't really lose it because they never had it. They were orders, and those orders were never fulfilled. So it's also not like the retailers sent a bunch of stuff back. They just canceled orders that Fender was going to manufacture and then send to them. So yes, if they had fulfilled those orders, they would have gotten that $100 million. So they did lose it in a sense, but they never had it to begin with, if that makes any sense. Putting that into perspective, he says, the figure equated to roughly 600,000 guitars and 200,000 amps. As such, the firm opted to move quickly. It was one of those things where you could not wait. Yeah, I'd say so. $100 million worth of canceled orders. You've got to do something and do it quick. That action took the form of slowing down manufacturing, a challenging task with supply lines that cross continents and dealing with significant stockpile of product. If suppliers had stuff that was about to hit the water, we said, please hold on to it and that we'll eventually need it and we'll work through it, he said. We stood up extra warehouses where the existing product could come into. Then we looked at every single piece of our operating expense infrastructure and said, where can we either cut costs or slow things down? The firm reportedly laid off 300 California employees last August, and the news appears to align with speculation online from players and dealers that Fender has been working through a significant oversupply. And if you pay attention to the news, the guitar news, like I do, and probably a lot of you guys, you remember when that happened. It was a pretty big story, and actually I'm not very far from the Fender California plant, the factory. So yeah, it was big news around here. Laying off 300 employees, that's a huge bummer for those 300. It would seem the call was the right one. Indeed, Fender CEO Andy Mooney told us earlier this year that 2022 ended up being the second best year we've ever had. Often what happens is that out of these tough calls and born of patience comes opportunity. Fender is 77 years old. We've been through recessions, wars, now a pandemic, economic turndowns, you name it, and the company has continued to thrive. It's always going back to the basics, saying, what does the brand stand for? What do guitar players or musicians want? And delivering on those things. All right, guys, so my thoughts on that. From reading that, and I'm just kind of speculating here, but from reading that, I kind of get the feeling that they didn't anticipate such a dramatic shift from, like, you know, you've got these high sales, you're selling more guitars, almost more than ever before, millions of guitars, hundreds of millions of orders from the retailers, and then all of a sudden it dropped off really quickly. It seems like they didn't anticipate that, or they weren't ready for that, which seems weird. Unless it just came so suddenly that there was just no way for them to be ready. And the other part of that about this that really kind of bums me out is, you know, they said things changed, things shifted because the lockdowns were over, the pandemic was over, people were, you know, going on vacations again and going outside and doing other stuff that they weren't able to do for a while. So maybe they, you know, put the guitars aside, or they just weren't buying guitars anymore because of that. And that just makes me wonder, out of all the people that picked up the guitar or bought a guitar for the first time during the pandemic, how many of them are still at it? How many of them are still practicing, still playing their guitars on a regular basis? Or how many of those new Squiers or Fenders, how many of them are now sitting in a closet, sitting in the corner of a room, or sitting in the garage and just collecting dust and maybe never to be played again? So that idea kind of bums me out. I'm not too worried about Fender. You know, they're fine. They're the biggest guitar company, right? So I'm pretty sure they're going to be fine financially. It is a major bummer for those 300 people that got laid off. I'm also really disappointed that Fender doesn't go to NAMM, but I certainly understand because it's a huge expense for them. So if you've never been to NAMM, Fender has a huge display. They've got like an entire section, a huge room showing tons of guitars. They've got all their employees there. You know, it's over like a 3 or 4 day period. So of course that's gonna cost them a ton of money. So I don't blame them for wanting to save money there. But yeah, for the 300 that they laid off, I don't know. I feel like they should have done a little bit better planning. Like when production was ramping up, like, okay, well, when this all drops off, what are we gonna do? We're just gonna lay off all these people that we just hired, and what are they gonna do? But hey, it's business. You know, I'm not a business guy. I'm sure they have business analysts. They have computer algorithms analyzing all this stuff, and they're gonna do what's best to maximize their profit, I guess. All right, guys, so that's pretty much it. Let me know what you think about this whole thing, and if it affected you in any way. And remember, like I said, the link to the article is in the description if you want to read the whole thing. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.